Up to this point, I had to rely on my memory, but as the conditions improved, hope has found me again. I started to feel I might survive, thus I got my hands on a notebook, so I started keeping a diary. Diary, February 28th, prison camp. Not only soldiers are kept here. For example, I was not on duty when I was captured. War is terrible, I've learned that much, even though I was never on the front lines. I remember the anxiety and despair. There were days when there was nothing in the chamber. It was empty. When there was something, it was dry corn. At that time, they had already invaded the city. The sight of enemy soldiers had become commonplace. But they did not shoot at civilians, and I had to eat. So, despite the biting cold, I was heading for the shop. I was hoping to get molasses there, which is a byproduct of sugar manufacturing. A viscous black syrup that looks like a shoelace when stretched. I planned to cook the dry corn and sweeten it. But 2 soldiers told me to go with them. I was awfully scared of them. They put me on the train, and 9 days later I was here. I ate the molasses on the train. I have 2 friends, Geza and Tamás. He found out someone had found the booklet in the mine. We exchanged it for my cap. I don't need it because it's almost spring and I have long hair that protects me enough. I met an old acquaintance yesterday. I'd rather say someone I knew. When I was young, we lived in the same city and all I wanted was to be like him one day. I hope he doesn't mind and we can join him. Diary, February 29. For the record, we are so skinny, we weigh less than 50 kilos. We eat all kinds of rubbish. This causes diarrhea for many. The camp doctor treats them by stuffing charcoal in their mouths, so I hope I won't have diarrhea. However, he has pediculicide. Just like many other people, I was attacked by lice. They treated us on the first day, but that was a long time ago. I didn't let my hair be cut because I don't have a cap. The doctor gave me medicine. I hope it works. These are my first 2 diary entries. I will continue to copy certain passages, but most of them are neither interesting nor readable enough to be quoted. I prefer to use my notebook mostly as a source of information. I try to organize its content and supplement it as logic dictates. I wrote my name on the cover of the booklet so that if I lost it or someone found it after I died, they would know who it belonged to. Death only came to mind as a second thought, and that was a significant change. One day, I noticed a shout in which I recognized Geza's voice, so I went to check. "Are you serious? You're defending this jerk?" A lot of people gathered there, but they were so thin that I could still see what was happening. Geza faced a bearded man who protected a figure lying on the ground with his presence. Someone else started talking to Geza. "Calm down, he missed. Let it go. Remember what happened last time. No food and we had to dig the grave." "Shut up," Geza growled. "He hit my chest with the pot, then even threw it at me. He deserves to get one." "He got enough," the bearded man said. "We all have better things to do than quarrel here." I only heard his voice a few times, yet I recognized it. It was quiet but firm. The tone settled in me. Geza pushed him. The bearded Labort staggered back. He's not trying to defend himself. I was surprised, because Labort had the strength to do so. I quickly walked over to Geza and pulled him away. "You don't want to mess with him," I said in a muffled voice. "I know this man. He's very dangerous." "Him?" Geza asked in disbelief. "Last time Zoli dominated him, he got 3 slaps and he didn't even fight back. Now he's playing tough." "I'm telling you, I know him and he's a good guy. Don't beat him, please. I tried to dissuade him from picking a fight with Labort. He means no harm. Please, let him be. He still didn't give up. As I held him back by the arm, memories thought to be forgotten appeared before my eyes. Many times, the best people are the ones who could be the worst, but they've decided not to. Don't upset him, I finally said. Geza relaxed with a growl. You're lucky he held me back, he pointed at Labort. And you? He turned to the man still trying to stand up. You better be careful. There will not always be someone to stand up for you. He walked away murmuring under his breath, and I walked over to Labort. Good afternoon, sir. I didn't dare offer him a handshake, but I looked at his face for a while, even though he wasn't looking at me. Then, a little self-conscious, I wandered my gaze at the people going about their business. Do you recognize me, sir? I asked. Labort nodded with a smile. Just call me Labort. Thank you, I replied. Have you been here for long? I asked, even though his muscular forearm gave away the answer. I arrived 5 days ago, Labort replied cheerfully, as we were at summer camp. You? I thought you knew better than to set foot in enemy territory. How do you know this is enemy territory? It's just a guess, he shrugged. I am certain we met civilians. I remembered an earlier sentence. I didn't go into enemy territory. They occupied the city. We were brought here in November, when the camp was still being built. It was really bad at first, then it got a little better recently. Do you know the date? Today. February 27, Labort replied after a bit of thinking. We were right then, I nodded, while looking around. It was late afternoon. The sun was crawling towards the horizon in a tired orange. At this point, it was worth retreating into the tents. The soldiers did not like to find us outside after dark. Where are you sleeping? Do you have a tent? I asked Labort. No, I slept in a different tent every night, he replied simply. I was a little embarrassed, having a hard time with saying my next sentence. You know, we would be honored if you could come to us. Labort smiled wryly. You have no reason to admire me. That sentence caused silence, and I was thinking for long seconds about what it might mean. Where do you live? He finally asked. He seemed bored. I'll show you. I've already started walking, but I became a little hesitant about whether it was a good idea to invite a familiar stranger to us. I was a young boy when we lived near each other. He lived in a condominium on the outskirts of the city, in the middle of a smaller part overgrown with acacias. A friend of mine had seen him rescuing someone from a robber. Later, he showed me the hero from a distance. I followed him several times. Once he addressed me when he saw that I was looking so intent. We talked a few more times after that, but he soon left the area. What I didn't know back then, that we still lived in the same city. Labort just moved to another district. The city was big, so we didn't meet. Any news about the war? The question came to mind. I was so preoccupied by the problems in the prison camp that I hadn't thought of the war until then. All I know is that Nochitka has already been occupied. That was the last news before I was brought here. I didn't really dare ask questions. Ask questions? So not even our own soldiers get information about the war? I was amazed. I'm not a soldier. You are not a soldier? I've never been one. How come? When I should have been, I didn't even have an ID card. Ever since the war broke out, I have been working in a weapon factory. I have been indispensable. I was. In the meantime, we reached the tent. I lived on the edge of the camp, in a tent tied with ropes. On the opposite side of the entrance, at the foot of the tarpaulin, we raised a pile of earth, which took some space, but leaning on it was comfortable. which Tamás was doing at that moment. "Greetings, Cricket," I said to him. "Come out, I'll introduce you to Labort." The tent was low. One couldn't stand upright. He was inspecting a butterfly on his hand. It was mainly reddish-orange, with black and yellow markings on the forewings. While the dorsal surface of the wings is vividly marked, the ventral surface is drab, providing camouflage. "It's licking me," he told me enthusiastically. I looked it up. The species is called the small tortoise shell, Aglais urticii. It lives mainly in bushy forest edges and clearings, where adults feed on nectar. They may have 2 broods in a season, the second one hibernating over winter. "Come on, Tommy," I encouraged Cricket a second time. He stood up and climbed out of the tent. He knew it was a serious matter if I called him by his proper name. Labort introduced himself to Cricket. Cricket grabbed his hand and his eyes widened. "What a handshake!" he praised Labort as he tried to wiggle the pain out of his hand. This is how Geza and Cricket got to know Labort. Diary, March 6th. My head is itching like mad. Geza makes fun of me scratching it even while I'm asleep. Cricket also got infected, but Geza didn't. Labort moved in with us. I'm so glad we became friends. He gave me his beaters, a name that stuck on the leather shoes we got on arrival. He said they were squeezing his white soles. He had cut himself a slipper out of plank wood, nailed an upper part on it from a canvas bag, and went to work wearing those. He wears several socks on top of each other. I decided to write in the diary every other day, but that might change. Most of us are at the railway construction, although some of us are in the quarry. They are breaking the gravel for the substructure of the track. Our task is to carry the dirt and debris to lay the foundation of the embankment. We were so weak, 5 of us could barely lift the sleepers. The labor inspector is always yelling, but we don't listen to him. Everyone is slacking off whenever they can. Our workday is only 8.5 hours now, including lunch break, but we have to walk to work and back on top of that. It's not a long distance yet, but it will get worse over time. I don't know where the line is going. We will find out eventually. Although it will probably take quite a long time because progress is so slow. The inspector could use a caliper instead of a measuring tape. The food is cold and often rancid. Our hands are freezing. We sit and stand more than we work. The supervisor runs around all day because work only happens wherever he shows up. There are guards all around the workplace, often with guns in hand. They look like they can barely wait for someone to try to escape. The best of luck fell on those working around the kitchen in the camp. I wrote a letter home. I managed to give it directly to one of the officers. He said he will mail it. Diary, March 12th. The lice are gone, thank God. One of the highlights of the day is when we line up for lunch. There are awfully long lines, but at least we don't have to work while we stand there and they allow us to talk. Ever since officers were changed by the new lieutenant, things became better, though not enough to improve our physical condition. We get more food, or I could say we get the prescribed head ration. Its quality has not improved, but we eat a little bit more. Some of it must have been regularly taken by officers, perhaps sold or fed to animals. A sign of the improving circumstances is that all of a sudden we started to crave things like art or love. The posts won't be long. I want to save the pencil. Diary, March 20th. I was transferred to the quarry. Geza and Labort have been working there already, so I asked to be allowed to work with them. To my greatest surprise, this time they let me. It is toil and moil. drilling holes in the rock, blasting stone, breaking stone, removing debris. The crude tools make the job even more arduous. But at least here we get to eat twice a day, and we can also cook and heat with the coal brought from the mine. There is also a pastor among us who encourages the spiritually and physically weary. Some are behaving terribly in the camp. They are in cahoots with the gods, they are even worse than them, as if they had gathered a lot of malice and almost waited for the world to give them some reason to become evil. Only the laws and society held them back. If I look deep into my thoughts, I can understand it a little bit. It's easier if you become corrupt, even obvious to do so in the short term. Some people, on the other hand, a surprisingly large proportion, did not allow themselves to deteriorate despite the poor conditions. I don't think a person has the right to go wry, even if circumstances would warrant it. Maybe the truly terrible thing that can happen to us is corruption caused by wild deeds. Sometimes I wonder what is the point of being alive. I'm not saying there's no point, just that I don't know what it is. My dreams are so troubled that when I wake up, often I have to say I had a tiring night. Diary, March 28th. I'm getting worried about the size of my pencil. Plus, I have a hard time sharpening it with the blunt knife. I'm very angry when the cord breaks. It's ironic that I record this all using the very pencil I'm talking about. For the sake of order, I found out we're in Camp 17. By sending a precise address to our people at home, I hope we get news from them. Labort fought with Nandor today. Luckily, it wasn't noticed. Nandor was made a leader so as not to harass the gods all the time. They more like just hit each other. A huge batch of corn has arrived, which I'm very happy about, because I'm fed up with the cabbage. I would say literally, but it's barely enough. The good thing is, we haven't had any trouble with it, as it was carried by soldiers. They must have been afraid that it would get eaten or put away. The explanation for the last entry is as follows. Part of our corps was surrounded. These corps capitulated. Nandor belonged to such a squad, his men still listened to him. He could speak to the guards on behalf of the prisoners. He was taller and thicker than the average camper. His strong face was accompanied by protruding ears, his chin round and wide, his eyebrows stretched forward. They probably provided good protection against any punches coming towards him. To the south of the soldiers' barracks was an empty space we called market or daycare, as most of us lingered or did business here after work hours. One day we became aware of a brawl. Things like this didn't happen in the first few months. People didn't have the energy to fight. I never thought there could be a downside to improving circumstances. The two of them started fighting and squealing in a muffled voice. Several people tried to separate them without much success. I did not understand how such situations could arise. I also had disagreements with other prisoners, but it was always possible to discuss things and agree on something. It never went further than a hustle. I stood among the onlookers with Cricket, pondering what I could do, but I didn't dare to intervene. Labort walked over to me and asked what was going on. "They got into a fight," I said, with impartiality. Labort settled the turmoil in an instant. He pushed the bystanders aside and threw the two fighters to the ground in two directions. There was silence. "If they see the upheaval, we won't get food," he said quietly. "What's missing?" he asked those on the ground, to see whether we could make up for the allegedly stolen object. But he didn't receive an answer because Nandor, who was coming in double time, started talking. "What's going on? You dare raise your hand against my people?" he shouted at Labot. Labot didn't look at him, didn't speak. Nandor slapped him. Labot hit the commander, who staggered back 3 or 4 steps. After blinking off his dizziness, Nandor began to repeatedly punch Labot's face with great fervor, who tolerated it without sound. After a while, he put his hands up. "Okay, enough. I hit you, you hit me too. Let's leave it at that," he said softly, glancing around through his eyebrows to see if the gunman had noticed the commotion. Nandor nodded, apparently surprised, still a little dazed, but giving his consent. There were 4 of us sitting on the railway embankment: Labot, Cricket, Geza and I. Initially, I had a hard time talking casually to Labot because I respected him and looked up to him. But with the time spent together, we were able to converse more and more relaxed. "I apologized to him," Labot said. "And did he forgive you?" I asked with a laugh, guessing the answer. He seemed very hostile. He looked at my complexion and said. Geza laughed and repeated the unusual expression. He said I'd better keep my head low, because he doesn't like mutants. "Mutants?" Cricket wondered. Labot, holding his fingers apart, held up his hand. Geza just glanced at him, pretending not to be surprised. I didn't see for a second what was there to look at. All I could see was that he had an unusually large hand. I didn't even notice. Cricket was amazed. Labot bent all 6 fingers of his right hand one by one to show they were working perfectly. He had 6 fingers on each of his hands and feet. He asked where I lived, but I didn't answer. Then he asked where I got it from and why wasn't it taken away. And he threatened me. "I hope if he kills me, the tombstone doesn't have to be cut by you guys," he smiled. The labor inspector appeared on the scene in a hurry. He knew our language, of course, one of the people who sided with the soldiers. By the time he got to us, we dawdled towards the stone and slowly started to work. 1, 2, 1, 2! Come on, faster! What is this slack?" he shouted, threatening with a wand in his hand. "Spin the drill, move, move! But make it look like you're alive!"